your favorite podcast platforms. You could find us on YouTube. Please remember to subscribe. I have an intriguing guest here today, Mr. Chuck Burt, coming to us from the state of Arizona. Chuck is a former cattle rancher, and we'll find out why he's a former cattle rancher. Chuck, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Glenn. Appreciate you.
So let's start with your journey to becoming a cattle rancher, and then apparently giving it up. Tell us that story.
Well, probably depends on how much information you want, Glenn. Because
Well, give us whatever you think is best. Did you grow up thinking you'd become a cattle rancher? Did you grow up in a family of cattle ranchers?
I grew up in a family that competed in rodeo, so that's pretty much where my cowboy ranching, ideas. I never thought I'd be a cattle rancher. I never thought I would be really a cowboy, to be honest. So but I did grow up in rodeo up until I was about 5. My dad had rode bulls, and my mom had competed in rodeo previously. And my grandfather, my uncles, I kind of had all the way around me. But my dad quit rodeo when I was about 5. So through that span up until high school, I was, I mean, we hunted, but as far as my lifestyle as a, you know, Western guy wasn't really established until high school when I started to compete myself
You
in
started to
rodeo.
compete in rodeos?
Yeah.
So
So
you were doing
that's,
what? Roping cattle, or what kind of competition?
I did start out because, since my father was a bull rider, I wanted to follow in that footstep. So I started um, riding bulls, but I got hurt early on. And it just so happened to be a time that my mom went to watch. So she didn't like what she saw. She didn't like the memories that it brought back to her forefront with her brother and her husband, riding bulls. So I
They
made a
had both
promise
been
to her.
injured also riding bulls?
Yeah. In fact, I remember when I was fairly young. I remember a incident where my uncle was hung up on a bull and broke his ankle. And I remember vividly that rodeo. There's not a lot of memories of rodeos, but I will say that my memories of early childhood were primarily at rodeos in the night. We got the country music blaring, the announcer blaring, and playing on the grandstands and stuff like that. So I do remember my uncle getting hurt, and so I had made a promise to my mom when that happened that yeah, I won't ride bulls. So
But you did ride a
although I
bull and
did
got hurt.
so I yeah, that was in my earlier stages of learning how to ride bulls. And so I made that promise. And although I didn't tell her, I did get on another bull in college, but I did it just so that I could say I wasn't afraid anymore. So basically just to prove to myself that, yeah, I can still do it. But so anyways, I did make that commitment to my mom and honored that for the most part. And but I went on to roping and steer wrestling, which I primarily competed in. I did compete in saddle bronc riding as well, but primarily calf roping, steer wrestling, and some bronc riding.
Okay. Um, I never did any of those things, so I don't know what questions to ask about that. I had good friends in high school who were wrestlers, but they were able to practice with each other. Like when you're steer
Right.
wrestling, I guess you can't say to a steer, "Hey, you want to practice with me?" You got to just get them in the rodeo.
Well, we did have a lot of practice animals. So we did
Oh, who'd you practice on? What kind of animals? A rabbit?
the same animals that we would see at a rodeo. So
Oh,
horned cattle, the typically Coriani breed, which is a smaller uh, Mexican breed that that rodeos use for steer wrestling. So we had our own uh, pen of steers that way, and there was multiple people that had their own cattle. So we would go to different people's houses, had their own arena. So in the Western world, if you're in rodeo, you'll find practice pens with cattle. So that's
mhm.
basically how we practiced.
So you like go to a neighboring ranch and say, "Could I play with your cattle now? I want to do some steer wrestling."
Well, we're all kind of buddies, so it's just like,
Yeah.
hey, you got maybe they'll ask, hey, you want to come over and practice, or
Hmm.
if you're wanting to practice on different animals, you can basically, hey, mind if I come over and practice or something. So
Now, what do you think the steer are thinking when these guys are wrestling with them?
that's a good question. It's um, they're a lot more intelligible than what we give them credit for. There's a lot of them that will create tendencies to keep from being caught. So there's some that will stop as soon as they come out of the chute. There's some that will duck their head when you go to get off and grab them. There's some that will duck. I mean, there's
Mhm.
all different types of tricks. So they do
Yeah.
have cognitive, capabilities to, warrant them from, not being caught.
Right.
But that's a good question. What are they thinking? Because obviously we don't know for sure. But I do know that they do have cognitive abilities to have the smarts to not be caught and to
Right.
pick up little tricks that they don't repeat
Okay, so you
over and
grow
over
up kind
again,
of in a
after a while.
rodeo
So
family with a lot of especially male members of your family interested in rodeo sports. And then, do you think I'm going to go from this to ranching? How did you get into ranching?
well, it was kind of another spell of life that didn't include that, but um, kind of a transition. I got married, and which at that time I decided I'm going to no longer um, compete. It's expensive. I wasn't top hand, so I didn't make a lot of money. I spent a lot of money, had debt due to that. So went into business and basically support for animal agriculture. Had retail feed stores, so we're selling feed to backyard livestock, poultry, horse people, and so that's kind of how I got into. Through that, I began to started to build my herd. I had some stability financially, had the ability to feed the animals at a lesser cost, and so that's when I started to build a herd outside. Well, we also had basically two herds going on. One herd was to practice uh, roping, and then the second herd was for beef production. So it was basically through my ability to financially, cover costs to build these herds at that time.
And where was this ranch?
Well, it was in Southern California,
Okay.
and it was basically the startup. My dad had property that where we kept the roping cattle, he had an arena set up as well. And then I kept the beef cattle separate from them, as I had certain expectations of how they were cared and treated and whatnot. So I didn't want to vaccinate them. I didn't want to give them antibiotics and all these things. I was a health advocate, and so I was using my cattle as a source of cleaner, less toxic, you know, product. So I fed them, all grass. I didn't give them any antibiotics, anything injectable. I use all natural means for parasites and stuff like that. Uh, so anyways, I kept them at my place, and then we ended up we had 3 feed stores in Southern California. We ended up selling those and moving to our property that we had in Arizona, which was an off-grid property of 74 acres. And so I was able to expand and continue the herd once we moved to Arizona.
All right. So how many years did you have the ranch in California, and then how many years in Arizona?
In California, it was probably, let's see, probably roughly about 5 years in California.
Right. And then in
And then in
Arizona?
Arizona, I would say probably before I began to transition my lifestyle, it was 3 to 4 years, I guess.
Okay. So 8 or 9 years total. You're a rancher. You and your wife are starting to have children and raising kids, right?
Yeah.
And then what happens to uh, to make you want to transition your lifestyle?
Well, I had thought that I need to sell my share of the store. We also opened up another store in Arizona. And so, but after like 3 years, I just felt that I need to sell it. And so my father and I, we actually, we just talked about it, and he says he would buy me out. So it was at that point where I had a lot more time on my hands, and we were living off grid. We didn't have a lot of, we weren't consumed by, television. We didn't have all the amenities. So we just spent a lot of time outdoors, a lot of time. I was trying to raise garden, perennial food forest. I was doing all the off-grid type of scenarios that enabled me to have time to think and ponder and be alone and quiet and take walks on the property. But I began to hear at this time that I need to stop eating uh, animals basically.
Now
I didn't have any.
you heard that in like a voice in your head, or were you listening
Yeah,
to
just a
my podcast?
little stall. No, just a small. Your podcast. Glenn, I've never knew anyone that was vegan.
Right.
I met someone in college that was vegetarian,
Uh-huh.
and I guess I there's good chances that I met someone, but I just didn't
Right.
know it. But in
Right.
college, I knew of one person. It was my roommate's girlfriend was vegetarian, and so I didn't know what vegan was. I didn't have a name for it. I didn't have
Right.
all I knew was that I heard in my, just a still small voice that you hear, like if you heard, hey, you need to turn here, and you do, and you miss maybe an accident, or you run into someone that you hadn't seen for 20 years, and so you wonder.
Right.
So just kind of like that still small voice, and I just heard that you need to stop eating animals.
So
And
there's a voice in your head
so
that says, Chuck, stop eating animals.
yeah, didn't use my name, but yeah, basically. and and I thought I was going crazy, and I thought I was nuts. I mean,
Did you
this is
did you
went against
report back to your
everything that
wife? Hey, I heard a voice that said, stop eating animals.
well, I did eventually, but it was a couple months. I was hearing this
So
for a
you
good
heard that
while before I
voice
was
constantly, frequently.
like, frequently, it was like, starting to get louder and louder, and I just decided, you know what, I probably should listen to this, and so I decided I was going to, and the first thing I did, of course, was to speak with my wife,
Yeah. And what did
and
she say?
to my complete surprise, she said, "I'll support you." She says, "I'll do it with you," and it was a good feeling to have someone that you love and care so much for, your best friend, to say, "Hey, I'll join you in this
Now, how
journey
long
you're
ago
on."
was this, Chuck?
Well, about 5 years ago, probably this
Five,
month.
5 years
Um,
ago. And were you and
I
your
didn't.
wife in good health at the time?
Oh yeah, we've always been on a health journey. We've always been, trying to reduce our sugar intake and processed foods, and uh, we didn't have any fast food in our area. We were rural, so we didn't. I mean, if we ate out, it was seldom, and tried to find cleaner sources of restaurants. But so we were always on a health journey. We've been on a health journey since we got married. We
Hmm.
we had done some research together and found some things that we wanted to follow, and we did that for 20 years as we progressed. So we were always on a healthier side. I mean, of course, there's much more healthier people and diets than what we had, but we were mindful, and we were
Right.
conscious about making good decisions. So
Okay. So you were on a healthy diet, but you were eating animal foods until 5 years ago when you start hearing the voice that says, stop eating animals. And you tell your wife, and she says, I'm with you. I'll stop eating animals with you. And then did you immediately both stop eating animals?
yeah, I have not had a consciously. I mean, I guess if something was hidden in the food since then, but I have not knowingly eaten uh, a piece of meat or fish or anything like that, or an egg since then. Now,
So 5 years ago, let me get this straight. You haven't read any books advocating the vegan diet. You hadn't seen any movies advocating the vegan diet. You just hear this voice. It says, stop eating animals. You tell your wife, she says, it's okay with me. I'll support you. And then you both, on a dime, more or less, stop eating animals. And did you continue having dairy?
no, I did accidentally at one time. It was kind of funny because we laugh at it afterwards, But my daughters were playing high school basketball, and the coach had rented out a whole theater for them to go as a team. I mean, it's a small theater, so it's like a huge thing, but small town theater. He rented out the theater so that the whole team can go there and watch a movie, and he invited parents and siblings and whatnot. So we went there, and this was probably a couple weeks after we started, and he had bought some pizzas, for all the student athletes, and I just I don't know. I just grabbed some and was eating it. It was cheese pizza. But my wife and son later said, "You're eating that cheese pizza." I was like, "Oh yeah." So it was like a habit, out of habit, I guess. Just grabbed it,
So you did it without
and
thinking.
but it had meat, but it was a cheese pizza. But I was just like, "Oh yeah, you're right." so that's probably, one of the only times if I've had dairy since then, it's probably something that someone put in something that, I didn't
Really?
want, but or no, but I ate it,
Yeah.
unknowingly. But yeah, so it's kind of a funny story because it was like, oh yeah, look at what's he doing? He's eating cheese pizza, and I was just like, oh, I had one of those brain farts, But
Okay.
anyhow, so yeah, but we don't we don't purchase anything that's
Okay. So,
of
but you
animals
you
anymore.
you had no background from seeing a film or reading a book or hearing some advocate of the vegan diet. You just did it because of a voice you heard in your head. And your
Yeah,
wife did it because you suggested it and she wanted to support you,
right.
right?
Yeah,
All
I
right.
thought
So
I was
then
going crazy. I mean, it
once
went
you
against
do it,
everything.
yeah. Did
I'm sorry.
I missed what you said there, Chuck. What did you say?
I just saying, I thought I was going crazy because it went against everything that I've ever been taught,
Yeah,
everything that I mean,
this is my
I
next
grew up
question.
hunting since I was,
Right. So you grow up in a hunting rodeo culture. You're a Western guy, a rural guy. You haven't read any books about veganism. You haven't been reading anything I wrote. You haven't been seeing any documentaries on veganism. You just hear a voice in your head. It says, stop eating animals. Your wife goes along with it. And do you wonder, wait a minute, is this healthy? Wait a minute, am I making a mistake? Why am I doing this? Should I now, did you start reading books or seeing any documentaries or did you just trust your instincts?
I trusted my instincts. Um, we had a trip planned for Mother's Day, and so 5 years ago, Mother's Day, it was probably a couple weeks before Mother's Day that we went to back to California to visit my grandmother. She was ailing, and we wanted to make sure we saw her um, before she passed. And while we were there, we used to go see a natural doctor in our hometown. So while we were there, we made an appointment, and I went and saw her. And she had picked up on some things that through her procedures that stated that, yeah, she basically confirmed that I need to stop eating animals, animal products, whatnot. And basically, she's not a vegan herself, and never ever when we've been to her has she advocated a vegan or plant-based diet, not even a vegetarian one. So she did, but she did confirm that, yeah, you need to stop eating animals and animal
Well, why
products.
did she think,
So
if she's not an advocate of the vegan diet, why did she feel that you needed to stop eating animals?
that's a good question. To this day I still don't know. We were basically just received as a confirmation, and after that, we I've sent people to her from that area,
Yeah.
but I haven't talked to her much since then. I've talked to her on the phone a couple times to help her with some friends that have some ailments that they wanted to try to use some natural means. I won't say the words because it might get some black marks on your YouTube channel. I don't know, but so but I haven't talked to her about my case since then, so I don't know. I
Chuck,
really I don't
I've
know what.
spoken to a lot of vegans in my life and asked them why they went vegan. And there are a lot who do it for health reasons. They get a heart attack or they get heart disease. They're overweight and they discover that this is the healthiest diet, the low fat, whole food vegan diet. I certainly know a lot of vegans who do it for the animals, who just feel that it's wrong the way we abuse animals. And some of them don't even care about health. I interviewed a fellow on my
Right.
show who said he would do it even if it was unhealthy. He doesn't care. He's doing it for the animals. And then there are those
Right.
who do it for the environment, for the climate, because animal agriculture is destroying the environment more than anything else. But you are the first who I think I've known who can say you were destined to be a vegan. You know, a voice
And
came
it's
to your
wild.
head. What's that?
It's wild. It's
Yeah.
wild to me. I mean, I've worked in a slaughterhouse. I've worked for
Yeah.
research companies using animals. I was grown up since 3 years old that I can remember, anyways. You know, hunting with my father and my grandfather, fishing, and that was my whole. I taught my children how to hunt. I taught my children how to rodeo. I taught them how to. I mean, all of this whole lifestyle just, you know, went away in a minute. You know.
And it went away, if I'm understanding you correctly, it went away without your having some conscious questioning of the underlying values of that lifestyle. You weren't questioning the health aspects of eating animals. You weren't questioning the morality of raising animals for food. You weren't questioning something about the environmental aspects of it. There was none of that. There was just a voice in your head telling you stop eating animals. Correct?
Yeah, I thought the whole climate thing was a hoax. I thought health. I was raising grass-fed meat.
Right.
I was eating organic
Right.
fed
You thought it
chicken.
was healthy.
I was everything that I was doing was organic, feed for my animals,
Yeah.
grass.
All
I
right.
mean, so
I get it, Chuck. You believed in it. You believed in it. You felt you had reason to believe in it. And then a voice comes to you and tells you to stop doing it. And here's the next important question. Once you stop doing it, once you stop making the mistake of eating animals and you listen, you heed that voice, you become willy-nilly a vegan. Do you at that point begin to question the underlying assumptions of the way we treat animals, the eating of animals on our health, the consequences on the environment? Did you start to look into it as a consequence of the change you made?
the first thing I looked at, Glenn, was spiritual aspects, or actually, I should rephrase that: biblical aspects. I was starting to look at what was there some things that I misinterpreted, that I misread, or is there a justification for, or even a lifestyle that is plant based within the biblical construct? And so I began to see some things that I did some research and diving into. So at the beginning, it was looking into the biblical concepts, and then it began to transition into more of a spiritual uh, lifestyle rather than just a true biblical concept. And from that is my empathy developing, my compassion developing, my paradigm of, you know, animals, what are they here for? My paradigm of we're supposed to eat these for health. All of those paradigms that I had for years began to transform into more of a spiritual and philosophical setting. And so that's how I became, more empathetic and compassionate for animals. And of course, through that, I've developed more of a consciousness of, the aspects in our climate, or for the earth in general. Our water systems, our forests, so our climate and natural resources were, something. But but it all just kind of was of an evolution. It wasn't something that, I grabbed a hold of everything all at once. But it started basically in a spiritual manner, and then evolved into, and now my paradigm has shifted to where, the earth provides spiritual benefits, everything, the water, the air, the sun. So it's all kind of evolved and brought me to where I am today, which is, total 100% advocate for animal welfare and how we, the ethics of that. The earth, our waters, our sea life, you know. So, and on top of that, the spiritual aspect and what I also believe to be some fallacies of what the religious systems have misused, some religious aspects and paradigms and doctrines to emphasize the eating and slaughter of animals. So total 180.
So have you stayed in touch with your old friends and family members from your days in rodeo life and ranching life, who were part of the culture that exploits animals? Have you stayed in touch, and have you lost any friends?
I don't know if I've lost any friends. I would just think that there's some of them that probably think I've, gone mad. But the people that I was once maybe involved with, I kind of evolved naturally in that sense. I've never been, my family and my wife has always been the forefront. So I was not much for, social life. I did have friends and people that I, talked to or whatever, but my rodeo friends have long been gone since I left California. When I moved to Arizona, I left all that behind, was basically working on building the ranch and our off-grid home. So I hadn't had any contacts with them. And then as far as like cattle ranching type people, yeah, I haven't spoke with any of them probably much at all. I mean, if I see them, I did have a lot of people in the same community that we had our off-grid property that we have seen on occasion because of our children's involvement in the community and with their children and whatnot. But I know that they all have probably wondered what happened to me because, it was such a drastic change. But none of them have ever approached me about it. So they still respect me as a human, I guess, enough to not make waves when we do see each other. So.
All right, we'll take a quick break now, and we'll be right back with Chuck Burt.
All right, if you've ever wanted to show off your plant-based lifestyle and do it in style, here's your chance. We have some of the most amazing t-shirts, hats, accessories, coffee mugs, and more at shop.realmeneatplants.com. We have statement t-shirts that will bring a smile to everyone's face. I love the I Want Tofu Tonight tee. Plus, we have podcast tees, Real Women Eat Plants gear, Real Kids Eat Plants, and Real People Eat Plants, just in case men, women, and kids didn't cover it all. Yeah, we love you and love that you want to show off that healthy lifestyle of yours. Again, check out our high-quality gear at shop.realmeneatplants.com and enjoy.
Okay, we're talking to Chuck Burt, who used to be a rodeo guy and a rancher. And then maybe he went mad. We don't know, but he went vegan. And he and his wife have been living a completely different lifestyle. And what about you have three young adult children. Have they followed you on
Yes.
the plant-based path?
Yeah. So whenever I talk to my wife, I thought I had a pact with her. I said, "Listen, don't say anything to our children. Let's just see how this goes, see what's going on." And she says, "Okay." So I mean, like I said, I taught them how to hunt. I taught them how to rodeo. We raised animals. We slaughtered animals together.
You
We butchered
slaughtered
animals
animals
together.
together. You had like a family slaughtering fest?
Well, for you know, wants put some chickens
Uh-huh.
or turkeys or whatever in the freezer, or yeah. So that's my two daughters would take part in that. My son, however, he never. We learned later that a little bit more about it, but he at the time he always left the scene. He never wanted to be a part
He backed out of the slaughtering.
of those.
And
Right.
how
So
did you and your wife and your daughters feel when you would slaughter a turkey or something? Did something inside you tell you this is a mistake?
no, I mean, no, it didn't. I mean,
Uh-huh.
that's what we
But
believed
I
in
mean,
doing. We
I've
believed
never
in,
seen this up close, but it must look pretty awful.
yeah,
No?
I mean, yeah, it's grotesque.
Yeah,
It is. And now looking at it, uh, I have a totally different mindset,
right.
totally different. When I will say this, Glenn, is that I mean, I did work in a slaughterhouse. I was on the kill floor. I can't count how many times I've taken the life of an animal. And so to me, it was natural. I grew up hunting. That was natural. I didn't have that connection with the animal to have empathy, to have compassion. Um, this was my thinking, was that they had the ability to withstand these traumas and these tortures because they were actually created for our benefits, for our consumption. So we had to do it. And I just, it's just kind of like, well, they have the means to deal with it. I didn't think of any differently. And so it wasn't until later, after I stopped eating animals, that I developed that compassion and that empathy, and began to really study animals and see. I mean, I experienced all the horrendous stuff that in a slaughterhouse. I've experienced all the horrendous stuff, hunting. I've seen stuff that I don't want to remember, really. And now when I do have remembrance, I can see that they are in fear. I can see that they are in pain. I can see that they are being traumatized. And but I didn't have that mindset. It was basically like, this is what we do. This is just how life is. We have to do this in order to survive. We have to do this to have meat. All these constructs that we build
Yeah.
up is what I had, so
Now, you and your wife were in good health anyway, but when you gave up eating animals and dairy products, were there any health changes at all, or did you just continue to be in the same good health you were before?
well, whenever I sold the store, my last store in Arizona, I began to have time where I wasn't on that day-to-day grind, where I wasn't waking up and grinding to go and do all the things that I needed to do to sustain my business. And when you have more time, you begin to notice things. And I had more time with my family as well, and they began to notice things. And what they noticed and brought to my attention was that I had some very serious cognitive issues. My memory, my enunciation of words, and my ability to form good sentences and have good communication, those things were suffering. My memory, my children would bring up something and they say, remember this, Dad, or whatever, and I'd be like, no, I don't remember that actually.
So you were
I don't know
noticing
what you're talking about.
your own cognitive decline.
Right. But I was so busy and so consumed with work and my business that I didn't have this until I was able to get out of that. And then we began to notice these whenever I would talk, I would have, like, I would stutter sometimes. I would be trying to form sentences and laboring in my head to speak on certain matters, and my children would tell me, "Hey, Dad, you don't remember this? This is." And then obviously with my wife too, you should begin to realize some of the things that we had conversed about, and I'd be like, "No, I don't remember that." And so she won those arguments because out of default.
Yeah. So as you're making this transition, you're recognizing that you've been starting to have some cognitive decline. Is that right?
Right. Yeah.
So then you make the transition, and what happens to the cognitive decline?
I don't know the time frame, but I will say that it's all recovered now.
So over the
I got,
last 5 years, it's 5 years that you've been a vegan.
yeah,
Over the last 5 years, the cognitive decline has reversed.
yeah, and I know that within the first year, things drastically got better. But of course, I'm not taking notes, and I'm not
Right.
trying to you know I don't write in a diary and all these things. So I'm
Yeah.
not thinking of a book, or I'm not thinking of a podcast, or I'm just, just living life. And so I do know that it was probably within the first year that I had a lot of these strengths, that I lost come back to me. But I will say for sure, 5 years, there's no more of that
Well, that's
affecting
fantastic.
me. So
And so your kids, did they adopt this lifestyle?
yeah, so when I asked my wife not to mention it to them, she says, okay. And it was probably maybe a day or two later. I don't, it wasn't very long at all. And she come home and said, hey, while we were gone in town, I talked to the children, and I was like, what are you doing? You said you weren't going to talk to them. And she says, well, listen, they're all willing to do this with you. So you have all of our support. And, that touched me a lot. Whenever I've taught them how to slaughter animals, hunt, do the different things that I taught them and growing up, that was the last thing I wanted to do, was try to, well, probably my ego, my pride, for one, because I'm taught them these things, and now we're totally going against everything that we were. And so they were 100% on board. And I will say that they have had peer pressure with their friends and whatnot, and their own convictions weren't maybe as strong, so they have not always kept their diet the way that my wife and I have. But they do refuse uh, torture of animals, uh, inhumane acts, and all of that kind of stuff. So, but they're finding their own way, and I'm allowing them to find their own way without being obnoxious, uh, dictating dad. So
Right. So Do they talk about it being difficult to make this transition to veganism?
I think their biggest, they don't really talk about it, but we have had small, conversations, and for the most part, it's the peer pressure. Their friends, you know, when they go to their sports meets or whatever, they're on the bus with the coaches and their teammates, and they're
Right.
stopping at, the fast food joints. They're stopping at the chicken places. They're stopping at, all these places, and they're the only ones who are not eating chicken nuggets or the hamburgers.
Right.
And so that was difficult on them, that pressure that they got caused them at times to eat dairy, and two of them still right now still do eat dairy because of the convenience rather than having, the just the friendships,
Right. Right.
getting weird with them. So
Right. I wonder if when your kids' friends ask them why they don't eat meat, if they say, "Well, Dad heard a voice," uh, is is that their explanation? Dad heard a
you
voice.
know that's a good question. I'll have to ask them.
Ask
What
them.
their
Right?
yeah.
Maybe we'll have one of them on the podcast one day to
Yeah.
explain. How do you explain that you went vegan when the reason is that Dad heard a voice? Um, and how is it? Is your wife enjoying this diet and this transition in her life?
She very much is. And what's great is having someone that you can go on this journey with. I know
Hmm.
a lot of people probably don't. And we've made the whole transition together. And she's never been an animal lover her whole life. When we
Really?
had animals, she had no draw, no compassion. We did have some burros, of course, but we were not slaughtering those. But she loved the burros because they have great personality. But as far as our chickens, turkeys, lamb, cattle, dogs, horses, any of that, she really had no connection with them. It was my thing. It was what I did and how I provided sustenance for our family. And but
And
today she is
now that
totally
she's
changed.
gone vegan, now she's developed the empathy.
Yes, and she's always been a very empathetic, but it was always for humans.
Right.
She's very empathetic in nature for but yes, her empathy and compassion for animals has blossomed in its full capacity.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Some people have the empathy, and that makes them go vegan. In the case of you and your wife, you went vegan because you heard that voice, and then you developed the empathy.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Yep.
where has this transition led you? You've recovered your cognitive capacities. You've sold off the ranching operation and the feed stores, right?
Yes.
So, where do you see this leading you now? Um, uh, how does it change your worldview and your plans going forward?
Well, there's a lot of dreams. I've always been a dreamer. I've always been one who has visions of things that I would like to do, and have quite a few of them that would benefit the animal kingdom, that would benefit our ocean life, that benefit the earth. All of that, comes with time and networking and uh, finances, and so I do have a lot of things that I want to bring my background to help um, change people's minds I mean, I'm not shy with my lifestyle, and I do know that I have made impacts on a personal level, but I would like to make bigger impacts, primarily for the big slaughterhouses, the big commercial uh, producers, that type of scale. But
Let me
all that
interrupt you
comes
there.
with,
How do you hope to have impact on the big commercial slaughterhouses?
well, that's a good question. I don't have that in full picture
All
yet,
right. Well, let
full
me
view,
know if there's a voice in your head
but
that gives you an answer one
it
day.
is something. Yeah, that'd be great. Um, but yeah, they definitely want to see. I definitely want to see the animal agriculture industry shut down, and it used to be my whole livelihood, my
Right.
whole life. But I reversed positions on that fully, and would like to see it shut down.
Yeah. It's
So
interesting, isn't it, that it used to be your life, and I'm sure you feel no enmity, anger towards the people who are still in that life,
no,
but you want to end it, as I
right.
do. And the reason is not just for the animals, but for the planet. It's
It's
destroying the
fall for
planet.
it's the whole system.
Yeah.
Everybody benefits from it,
Yeah.
not just not just the animals, and not just our health, or not just you know our water systems, and not just our forests, not
Yeah.
you know but the whole ecosystem. It all
Yeah.
works together, and it's all going to benefit. It's
Yes.
not is what I've learned is that we're all connected, we're all together. And if
Yeah.
we don't have um, if we lose to it's we're basically doomed if we don't,
Right.
as a species ourselves. And of course, our Earth is doomed. So
Yeah.
our oceans, everything is doomed. So
I have a friend, my dear friend, Dr. Silas Rao. I've interviewed him a couple of times on this podcast. Silas says there's nothing that does not improve when people
right,
stop eating animals. There's nothing, from the water, the
indeed,
forests, the land, the air, the climate. There's nothing that does not improve.
indeed.
If
And
people,
on a more spiritual level, and philosophical level, I truly believe that like some of the ancient philosophers that I never read about until the last 5 years. But I truly believe, that peace will only come whenever we change what is on our plate,
Mhm.
and I truly believe a lot of the atrocities that we see with humanity, as far as war, as far as um, child trafficking, and slavery, and all of these things, they're all tied. They're all tied to how we treat animals, and what our slaughter systems, and all of those things. We force pregnancy upon our animals. We force, uh, the ejaculation of our animals by sodomy. And there's so much tied to what we do to animals and what happens to humanity because of it. So, um, immediately, we'll see a change and what happens to humanity whenever we begin to change what we do to animals.
Well, Chuck, you've been willing to tell your story on my podcast, and I appreciate that. Do you ever think of telling your story, on uh, in some other format, going on the speaking circuit, as it were, to let other people know what you've experienced?
Glenn, it wasn't until a friend of ours, our mutual friend, till I met her a couple months ago that I had ever considered much. I did have another person reach out to me and gave me an interview, but I've never thought past that. But Linda seems to have put some things in my ear, and we'll see how things go. I don't know. I personally am not desiring a spotlight or wow, look at what he did, look what he's doing. None of that. My whole purpose of anything that I ever do would be to benefit animals, and in turn that would benefit the rest of the ecosystem. But I don't know what's to come. I'm not going to try to forecast that, but if it comes, it comes. I had some hesitancy whenever our friend mentioned this, and the reason being is because I don't want to be in the spotlight. I don't want it to be about me. I don't want it to, that's not what I'm about. And so we'll see. My mind is always evolving, and I'm open to whatever comes. So we'll see what happens.
How does your wife feel about it? Does she feel, hey, Chuck, we have a message we have to get out? Or is she a very private person?
She's private too. And so probably she's even more private than me. But she's kind of an introvert, even though she does when she gets to know you, she'll come out of that. But she's fully supportive of what happens. She's not like, trying to tell me no, but she does give caution and good sound advice and wisdom that like most women do. So
did she have any health changes when she went vegan alongside you?
I don't know of anything specifically. She did have some issues when we first conceived our first child. She had some seizures, and she changed her diet quite a bit at that time, and hasn't been steady on that because she hasn't had a need to. But I imagine that there's some benefits, but we have not been to like the MDs and the physicians and whatnot. We've never had blood work done. We've never had anything done. And the last time she was at a doctor's, whenever she had, probably the last time we took our last child. Actually, the last time she'd been to a doctor was probably when she gave birth to our last child. So, so we're not conventional in that sense. So we don't really know. Well, I'm sure scientific mind can put all this together and say, this and this, but I'm positive that she has had some benefits. It's just, nothing that we can confirm or,
Right.
So.
And the kids, are they all happy with their new way of eating?
They seem to be. My son, he's the most has the most convictions, I would say.
Right.
And so he is very much in tune with what's this lifestyle, and not only for himself, but for the animals and for spirituality. But it's kind of fun because here in the last couple months, he's really taken to cooking and making meals for us.
That's
and
nice.
so he gets very excited. He's doing a wonderful job, and he has some great foods that he's put together. And my wife and I are trying to transition to more of a whole food, fruit based and whatnot, but we can't turn down his good cooking. So, which is kind of funny because he's never been in the kitchen ever, and just in the last couple of months, whenever he was living on his own, he's eating out of a box all the time,
Right.
Now he's cooks good stuff, and it's fun. A lot of whole foods, but it's a joy to be a part of that.
Does he have an idea what he wants to do with his life?
He's on a very strict spiritual path that he's put himself on, and he wants to better humanity. He wants to better the earth. He wants to better the animal kingdom, but not in a conventional sense, not in a traditional sense. He's doing it more on a spiritual level, and he does want to travel, but he wants to have opportunities to kind of walk alongside of people and help them with their transition into a more conscious lifestyle. So,
and your daughters, do they have career ambitions at this point?
that's a good question too. That's they're 18 and 19, and that's probably changes often. But currently, my youngest has been admitted to a university as a pre-vet student.
Okay.
So we'll see what happens with that. We're not holding her feet to the flame to make sure she completes anything. This is all on her own. It's ironic. I was a pre-vet student in college, and so she is now pre-vet. So we'll see. I know prior to this, both of my daughters were wanting to get into marine biology.
Okay.
Now the one is pre-vet, so we'll see. I would love for them to be in marine biology because I think that is. But I also was encouraging them. You don't have to be a professional. You don't have to go to university to benefit marine life or to benefit animals at all. You can do this without. But I support them in their endeavors, and I am not necessarily an advocate for a pre-vet student because I do know that they do use a lot of animals in research and labs and whatnot, and so, but I have to allow her to walk her journey and
Right.
just love her and support her and be there for her whenever she has questions and concerns and different things. So
Yeah. All right. Would you say that that you are just following your path without knowing where it's going to take you, as opposed to having a plan?
yeah, I would say so, pretty much. I've always been kind of a spontaneous kind of personality, and anyways, and we do intend to take our lifestyle on the road soon and travel in the states where we're in the United States currently, and we do intend to find ways to network with others and to link arms with others and to support others in the lifestyle, or who are having questions, or maybe even speaking up in some more dramatic fashions. We'll see. We just day by day, and whatever happens is going to be that way. So
All right. Well, Chuck, it's been a pleasure talking with you, and just keep listening to
Likewise.
that voice in your head.
Right.
I think you can't
Right.
go wrong listening to that voice.
Yeah,
So,
I agree. And I was scared whenever I did hear it, but it was the best thing that's ever happened to me.
were you a
I could
little
say
worried that you were going crazy?
no, I really did. I honestly did. I thought I'm going off my rocker.
But your
But
wife didn't think so.
she didn't, I guess she loves me that much.
Yeah, good for her.
Yeah, I give her props. I've done a lot of different, things in my life, but that was a huge transition,
Yeah,
and I'm forever grateful for her and her ability to link arms with me in this.
right.
It's not just become my conviction now; it's both of our convictions, and that's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing. Instead of it's my thing, it's that's our lifestyle together.
Well, it's a great story, Chuck, and like I say, you're the first one I've interviewed whose transformation to the vegan lifestyle came because of a voice. And and then everything else followed that. So I love this story. I think you're doing well to follow this path, and let's stay in touch. I'm curious what the next chapter is going to bring.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Glenn, and I appreciate you all the work that you do to share other stories and to bring the message out to those who have an ear to hear and an eye to see things. And I I believe that the settings like this is so powerful because it's not. Um, I don't know. It's there's a lot of ways where we can combat things, and those are necessary. But for the philosophical mind, for those rational minds who want to sit down and just and hear a story, and hear a lifestyle, is I believe a very very powerful platform, and I appreciate all the work you do for that.
Well, thank you, sir. Let's stay in touch and let's have you on again in a while, okay?
All right,
Take care.
all right. Much love and peace to you.
Thank you. This has been the Glenn Mercer Show, where everyone listening turns vegan, regains their health, and annoys their friends and relatives. Find us on YouTube at The Glenn Mercer Show and across all your major podcast platforms. Don't forget to subscribe.